Because of the ongoing drought in the state of California, we are at risk for wildfires year-round. I'm Gloria Cohn, and this is City Hall in Focus. Joining me today is Dave Pucci, the fire chief of the city of San Carlos. Thank you for inviting us to Station 13 today.
Thank you.
What areas in the city of San Carlos are at risk for wildfires?
There are several areas of town that have what we call the urban interface, which is the transition from open space, open grassy areas with trees and everything, that transition to where houses are. So any place where you have a fuel load, which would be trees, grasses, brush, that comes in close contact with homes, those areas are at risk.
When you use the term fuel load, we're just not talking about gasoline. Describe more specifically what you mean by that.
For the fire department, if the fuel load is anything that'll burn. In the context of the wildland, we're talking about trees, brush, and grasses. Those three different types of fuel interact in a way that put homes at risk. Typically what we see is dry grass is a very easy type of fuel to ignite. We see that with fireworks, campfires that escape, any kind of spark when you're mowing lawn. That's why we encourage people not to mow their weed area when they're clearing space when it's hot and dry. Those grasses can catch fire very easily, and then it becomes an even bigger concern when those grasses carry the fire towards an area that has trees where we can really start building up some fire. These pictures are examples of fuels coming in close contact with homes. Anytime that you have trees that come in contact with a house without having that defensible space around a house, they're at risk for wildfire.
What proactive steps then should a homeowner take to prevent this from happening?
The proactive steps you can take is trying to harden your home from the effects of fire. So you have to look at the type of roofing material that are on a home. The old wood shake roof will take fire very easily. Also making sure that your eaves are sealed to keep embers out. Making sure your gutters are clear so the old leaves and dry pine needles that are in the gutters don't catch fire. And then it's really important to have, for the city of San Carlos, we encourage people to have 30 to 100 feet of defensible space. And we hear that 100-foot term most commonly, and we recognize in San Carlos a lot of property lines are much shorter than that. So it's 30 to 100 feet of defensible space up to your property line. Give us the room to operate to be able to keep the fire away from your home, and that's how you would do that.
When you say defensible space, does that mean no vegetation within a certain amount of distance from your home?
Not no vegetation, but there are certainly some fire-resistant plants that can be used. There are obviously green grass, that kind of thing. It doesn't carry fire like the wildland does. We're talking specifically about eliminating the tall, dry weeds that build up over the course of the winter time. Keeping your trees trimmed back so that the limbs don't come in contact with the house to carry the flames to the house itself. Having that space for us to be able to operate with our hose lines so we can keep the fire away. It's about keeping the heat away from your actual structure.
If we have a question about our vegetation, is it possible to call your department and ask for some advice, or will you come out and give us your thoughts?
We do what we call wildland inspections in the spring building up to the summertime, where we send resources out into those areas of town that we know have a lot of open space next to housing, and we do those inspections. Additionally, we will provide information to anyone that asks. They can call us or look on our website for fire safe tips.
So what you talked about, not mowing your lawn during certain times of the day, or what are some of the prevention tips that you want to let us know about?
Once your home is protected from fire by having defensible space, by having that appropriate vegetation that's near the house, by having your eaves cleaned, all that, then also we want to encourage or discourage the actual start of a fire. We see that a very common source of fire during the summertime, or when people are trying to mow the weeds a little late in the season, and they're doing it on a hot, dry, windy day, and the weeds are already dry enough to carry fire. A very common source of ignition is mowing weeds, and it's actually an effort to try to prevent a wildfire, and they end up causing it. So we need to pay attention to the weather before we do those activities as well.
Any hazards in propane tanks and barbecues?
Not so much, as long as they're away from anything that can catch fire. So you want your barbecues to be on your patio and not too close to weeds, and be careful with that. Basically anything that you can think of that's going to keep the potential ignition source away from the weeds that can actually start the fire. And also we need to point out that all fireworks are prohibited in San Carlos. So even what's typically called safe and sane are not okay. They are a very common source of ignition.
In the case of a wildfire that's out of control, can you talk to us a little bit about mutual aid?
In the state of California, we have a very robust system of mutual aid, and it especially in the last couple of years, it is exercised every single summer. We have seen some very large fires throughout the state in the last several years, and the San Carlos and Redwood City fire departments have participated in the mutual aid system. So what that means is when they could have a large fire in the Los Angeles area, and the state has a coordination system that will send the most appropriate resource to go fight the fire. Occasionally they get big enough to where we get a phone call and are told to get 5 engines together and a battalion chief and drive down to LA and go help them. And the benefit of that, one, is obviously the experience that our firefighters get locally on battling those really large wildfires, but also being part of that system is we can bring a tremendous amount of resources into San Carlos to fight a large fire. It's really only limited by drive time, but we can get, I've been on fires with 8,000 firefighters in it.
Well, so lots of good experience for your folks here.
Absolutely.
You suggest to people that they have an evacuation plan in place should the event of a fire take place.
The same, or very similar to your home evacuation plan. If your smoke alarm goes off in your house, you want to know that you have 2 ways to get out of your house. The same applies to wildland fires. You need to know which streets you're going to be able to use to be able to get out of your neighborhood. Always better to know that you have multiple ways to actually leave your neighborhood. Always keep in mind too, when we're doing these plans, that we don't want to assume the streets are going to be clear and everything's going to be great. We're going to be able to go down the street that we normally can. Imagine the worst case scenario. What if the fire is right up against that road? How else would you get out there? What if a road was clogged with fire apparatus as we're trying to come in to fight the fire? Do you have multiple choices on ways to get out of your neighborhood?
You also have some suggestions regarding what to take in case of an emergency evacuation. What are those?
Keep it very basic and think about it now. You're not going to have time to think about it when the fire front's approaching your home. So if there's a fire in the area, we do have ways that we can notify our community that there's a threat. And it's called SMC Alert, and you can find that link on our fire department webpage to go sign up for that service. But a lot of times there's not time to actually do that. So an evacuation order could also be a San Carlos Police Department vehicle driving through the neighborhood, speaking loudly on the PA saying it's time to leave. So you can't count on having a lot of notice that there's a fire coming. It could happen to be a half mile from your house, and it could be approaching your house within minutes. So really you need to think about it ahead of time. If it's an emergency and the fire front is approaching your home, don't take time to get anything. It's just time to leave right then. You need to protect life over property. If you do have a chance to gather some things, we encourage people to get those critical documents that they want to take with them. A lot of people find it important to get those family photos that are irreplaceable. It is the irreplaceable items that you want to grab if you have time. But again, don't ever take the time to get items when there's a life threat.
Well, the 21st century answer to that is like cell phone and laptop, right?
Most people, I think, would grab their laptop, and and also with cloud storage now, that makes it a little bit easier. Then you don't have to worry about losing your photos. But a lot of people have older family photos. But the point really is to think about it ahead of time. You're not going to be able to come up with good ideas when there's a fire approaching your house.
I'm recalling the lake fires. I think that was last summer, when I saw people who were just really hesitant to leave their homes. And then I even saw some homeowners trying to extinguish the fire on their own with the garden hose. Your thoughts on that?
Last year I was on the Butte fire. I was up there with a strike team. And the problem that we have is when people are asked to leave a neighborhood and they want to stay behind and protect their home, those decisions are typically made when the conditions around their home are okay. The fire hasn't reached them there yet. And that oftentimes will change when the fire front gets there and the person then wants to evacuate. The problem is it may be too dangerous for us to even be able to operate in that area at all. So we always encourage people to really listen to the evacuation orders, to leave the area when suggested, and we will do our best to protect your homes with the resources that we have. But having a life safety issue by having a resident remain behind means that you recognize we may not be able to come back and help you when conditions worsen.
So to be, just to recap, you want people to have an evacuation in mind, maybe a couple of ways.
Multiple routes to leave your house.
That includes the house, and that includes your area around you, the streets.
Correct.
And how will we know that a fire is dangerously close? What kind of alerts again?
Well, really for the short term, depending on how close you are to the beginning of the fire, there may be no warning at all. If we have the opportunity, we will always try to notify ahead of the fire front. So you could potentially get a phone call from SMC Alert. You could hear a law enforcement official outside instructing people to leave. Usually wildland fires are pretty obvious. Really, if you see that column of smoke going up, you should take the initiative yourself that if it's time to leave, it's time to leave and take that initiative. You may not hear from us if we don't have the time.
And all good advice. So thank you very much for inviting us today, Chief Pucci.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on City Hall in Focus. I'm Gloria Cohn.